Hello, my name is Vicky Wishay, and this is A Wealthy Life. And today we're going to be talking about why HMOs could be a complete waste of your time. Quite a strong statement. A lot of people will think about HMOs as being an opportunity to make greater cash flow. Before I go in and I explain what the problem is, and it basically is a maths problem, a time problem, let me just recap very quickly what an HMO is if you don't know what one is. So an HMO stands for House of Multiple Occupancy. And this is where you take a property and instead of renting it out as a complete house, a unit, you break it down and you rent it out by the room. So instead of having one single tenancy contract, an AST, assured short hold tenancy contract, you now have maybe 4 or 6, or some people will create much bigger properties and might even have 10 rooms in a property. So there's your maths problem right off. Because when you rent to a family unit and they take over the entire property, they're the only ones walking through the door as a family group. What you have is one tenancy agreement, which is set up once with one set of tenancy referencing. You get one rental payment coming in a month. You usually have one head family member who might report repairs, but also they're thinking of this as their home. This becomes their domicile. Fine. When you rent it out by the room, and let's just use the example of 4. So now what you've done is you've taken, let's say, a 3-bedroom house, and its layout is such that you've got 3 usable bedrooms upstairs, and downstairs you've got 2 living rooms and 1 you can convert to a bedroom. So that's how you've made your 4 bedrooms. You now put in, and you have 2 choices. You might go with a group, but you might go with 4 strangers. So let's just say 4 strangers. 4 individuals, and these 4 individuals will require 4 tenancy agreements, 4 sets of referencing, 4 sets of letting agent fees. They will pay the rent for the entire property in 4 pieces. And yes, what you might get is potentially, should we say double, maybe double, triple, something like that, double or triple it. But I was trying to reach a formula, but actually depends where you are in the country. You're going to get more money than if you sold it as a single unit. But there are consequences. So there are a number of consequences, and I'm going to go with the time problems. But briefly, just to tell you, you will be responsible for the council tax bill unless your tenants are exempt in some way, and the entire house has to be exempt for the exemption to apply. You will be liable for the utility bills, so the gas, the electric. You will be required to supply a TV license, because even if they say they're not going to watch the TV and one of them does, you as the landlord will get the fine. You will be responsible for providing Wi-Fi, because without Wi-Fi, people aren't going to want that. You don't have to do any of that. If I rent this property to you as a house, you take it on. If you want Wi-Fi and you want a TV, that's different. But when you've got 4 people living in a house, who was it who watched the TV? One person wants Wi-Fi, one person doesn't. It doesn't work. So you have to treat them as strangers, that you provide an environment so that they can live together. So I'm on the descriptions at the moment. Why is it a time problem? So I said, in this case, you're going to have 4 ASTs versus 1. Why is that a problem? Well, I suppose it depends on what your strategy was. Why are you investing in property? And if what you're doing is investing in property for cash flow, then you might say, well, hold on a second, Vicky, but HMOs are going to give me more cash flow potentially when we get to it than if I just sell a single, rent out a single property. But why did you want the cash flow? And if your focus is on cash flow rather than doing development, doing flips, doing anything else that's more time consuming, why did you pick cash flow? You picked a cash flow strategy, a simple, maybe buy to let strategy. Let's say that for a minute, because what you wanted to do was have this simple process, because there's other stuff going on in your life. Maybe what you're doing is you're putting your money into property to secure a financial future for yourself, your retirement maybe, or just that you know that there are things coming down the line that you want to have extra money for, which is great, but you're still working. So maybe you're running your own business, or you've got a senior position in a company. You don't have time to be hands-on. You have time to be on it once a month where you check the rents. You have time to step in and deal with a repairs complaint or something that needs just your approval for your letting agent to take it over and deal with the repair. But you don't have time to be having a piece of your brain almost like thinking about this HMO on a daily basis, because it's going to eat into your time. It's going to basically make you feel out of control, because if you have something that is systemized, something that is manageable, then what you can do is feel in control, because I've got systems, I've got team in place. Now you're going to go again, well, hold on a second, Vicky, I could have all of that with an HMO. You can, but when you have just one or maybe two, it's much harder to pull that off than it is when you get maybe 3 or 4. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I still maintain that HMOs can completely waste your time if you do not control them. And let's break down where the issues could occur. Okay, so we're going to have more people in a property, and I'll do another version in a minute, but these are going to be 4 strangers, 4 separate contracts. So you're going to have higher turnover, because think about the person who is living in a room in a shared house, quite probably with a shared bathroom. This is not someone who could afford a studio or a flat. That's one option. And why? Because, well, if they could afford a studio or a flat, they would be living in a studio or a flat. They're living in a house because they can't afford it. The other thing that they could be doing is they could be very temporary, and they could be people that have come to a specific area for work. So, for example, when we were over looking at the east of England, we had a lot of farm workers. They could be people that are over on computer contracts and you know, tech contracts. We had that when we were looking in Reading and working in Reading. So there can be different types of people, but they're going to be strangers. They're going to be there because they don't want to or can't afford to put their money into some other form of accommodation. So you're going to deal with now 4 ASTs, but 4 sets of turnovers, and those turnovers are going to come with voids, because unless you can really be very focused and respond really quickly, which means the HMO has to take a priority over everything else in your life, the chances are that when notice is given, you don't react quickly enough, you don't get the inspections carried out, you don't get the advertising done, and so when the tenant moves out and the room is refreshed, there is a longer gap before a new tenant comes in. Now, that can be mitigated with a letting agent, but I'm not going to do how you mitigate these things yet. Those are the problems. There is the cost of the room refresh. So yes, all of your tenants will always come with a tenancy deposit, but there is this sense of wear and tear. So is there wear and tear in the room, or is it damaged by the tenant? So if the tenant has made holes in the wall or put blue tack on the wall or done anything to the room that has technically damaged it, then either they have to make good, they have to pay for the repair, or it comes out of their deposit. But if there's just a general grubbiness in the room, so they've pushed the bed against the wall and the bed has marked the wall, but now you want to rent the room with the bed back in the middle again, you're going to have to paint the room. If you've had a few tenants change over, but they haven't particularly spilt anything on the carpet, you will every so often need to go in there and get that carpet professionally steam cleaned. So there's all of these little bits just in that one room that you're going to have to think about. And then, of course, there's the letting agent fees. Every time there is a void, or every time a tenant gives notice, you're going to have to pay the tenant the tenancy fine fees, the referencing fees, all over again through the letting agent. So more people, more turnover, takes more time, has more cost. Now, more generally, we've got 4 strangers in the house, so more people. This actually leads generally to more refurbishment, because now what you've got is 4 strangers, so no one is generally taking responsibility of the property. So if, for example, there was a dripping tap in a family home, what you might find is that the lead person in the family would report the dripping tap to the letting agent, and then we change the wash or whatever else. If that continues to happen, for example, in a house of multiple occupancy, and you've got 4 strangers and they're not having communal time, they're coming and they're going, they're just functioning in that property. They do live there, but it's not their home, it's a temporary place for them. Then they may not pay attention to this, and that drip could turn into a leak, and the leak could turn into a problem. You could have a bit of dripping going on in the bathroom or the shower, and then all of a sudden you've got staining on the ceilings downstairs, or you could even be in the position where you get a flood. So you get more refurbs, more repairs that are required to a property. And they are generally going to be harder on the house, because they are totally aware that this is not somewhere they're going to stay for the long term. So they might, if you haven't got door closers, slam the cupboard doors, or let the cupboard doors slam, and then that makes the hinges weak. Or they might let the front door slam rather than having it closed or something, and that might make the hinges weak. So there's all sorts of bits like this that can just make it harder on a house. Your house has to be able to stand up to hard wear. And then we've got different people. How do you, I suppose, create a culture, a community space for these people to live? And I'm not talking about, oh, you make a nice front room and they've all got sofas, because they're probably not going to sit in there all together. There is an exception to this that I'll cover in a minute. They're not going to sit there all together and have a cup of tea together. They're probably going to come into the kitchen, and what might happen is that 1 or 2 of them are trying to cook their dinner at the same time. So again, thinking about how you've arranged your kitchen is probably more important than using the space to put a dining room table. But it's this culture that can lead to what I call the domestics. So with a house, there's parents in the house and children in the house. If they have a row with one another, or Junior's upstairs playing his music too loud, or I don't know, daughter brings home friends that are loud, or there's smoking or something, or anything that irritates you, you are the parent, you're in a position where you can then turn around and say, enough, my child, that's not behavior that I want in this house. Maybe that's a bit more about my parenting skills. Pass on from there. But if you are living in a house with 3 other strangers, and one of them's noisy, one of them snores, one of them's got less happy bathroom habits, one of them never wipes up after themselves in the kitchen, eventually these little niggles, if they don't have a way to communicate with one another, can become quite a bugbear. And so you can get embroiled in the domestics of the house. If you start to have, let's call them a problem tenant within an HMO, you then get caught up in that. You never get caught up in that in a just a house. And so you need to think about how that is going to impact on your time. Now, just as another version of this, what you might do is rent it to a known group, which is typically a group of students. And maybe not all students know one another, they can be strangers, but sometimes you get groups of students want to rent a house to share together, and that's fine. What you can then do is you can then mitigate some of those stranger problems by training them how to live together, by having, they will tend to deal with their own domestics. But what you can do is, where you are liable for the utility bills, you can get one of them to be the utility bill monitor and make sure that they update their gas meter readings, because there'll be fair usage, and you're going to have to look at how that's taken care of, and that will apply back up to your stranger property as well. So those are all the problems with an HMO, and that in a sense is why you would want, if you were going to follow that strategy, you want that strategy to pay you more money than a simple buy-to-let, because a simple buy-to-let is easier, if I say it that way round. and less time consuming than HMO. So if you're going to have to put more time into it, you want to make sure that you're going to make more money out of it. Otherwise, why would you do it? I think that you can also just run through in your head ways that you could avoid some of these problems, that you can mitigate them. And one of the easiest things to do, obviously subject to building regulations and all that sort of stuff, is to split the house. So that if there is a way that you, instead of going, right, well, I'm going to have 4 bedrooms and I'm going to maximize the income from this, that if you split it and you went for quality, and it depends on the layout of the property, you could then have a unit upstairs that has got maybe less bedrooms, that might be a 1-bedroom upstairs or a 2-bedroom upstairs, and downstairs might be a 1-bedroom. And you could be in a position where you're giving people a bit more independence. Now, if you don't want to do this as a permanent and actually properly split it into flats, what you could do is you can make it so that there is a self-contained unit downstairs and a self-contained unit or 2 upstairs. We did this with some of the properties by making it so that they all had their own en suites, so that every person had their own bathroom in the house. And so they had their own space, and then they would just come down to make use of the kitchen. That is one way of looking at it. You're not making a bed sit. You're not making it so that they never come out of their room. You're not trying to cram everything into a small space. And there are legal requirements to cover off what you're allowed to do, what makes a legal HMO. But you could be in a position where you're making these units more desirable, because what is the worst thing for most people? I mean, some of you might say that it is cooking in a dirty kitchen, but I think using a dirty bathroom would be the thing that would drive me insane, because I could always go somewhere else to eat. I couldn't keep leaving the house to use another bathroom. You need that space to be as pleasant an experience as possible. And so considering how you utilize the house. Now, you can also mitigate the problems by simply having a really good team and systems in place. So you have a house WhatsApp, so that if they've got problems, all of the tenants are all on there and they can speak to one another, and you're just almost like the moderator. You don't really have to get involved. They're not talking to you unless they're reporting a repair. And then you can even encourage them that they report the repair direct to the letting agent. So there are teams and systems that you can bring in that can bring down some of the pressure on your time. But of course, bringing in a team, bringing in management is actually going to eat into your cost. And some letting agents, where you might pay anywhere from 8 to 12% letting agent fee on a house, you're going to be paying 15 to 24%, a quarter potentially of your money, to a letting agent on a house of multiple occupancy, because they know how much time it takes. You could be local. You could take on the management yourself. But of course, then that's going to take us all the way back to, why were you doing this strategy? If you're doing this strategy purely for cash flow, and maybe you're in a position where you're in a partnership, maybe husband and wife, brother and sister, whatever it is, one of you can be local and one of you can be that role of the letting agent. So the letting agent finds you the tenants, but you take over the management of the house. Or you could do it by having a local trusted trader that maybe was a cleaner or a builder or something like that, something that can take care of the local management of the property and keep an eye on the property and keep in touch with those tenants. That can be an option. So again, one person that I know in the market, they got enough properties together that they then brought in effectively their own letting agent, somebody who had the skills to find the tenants, manage the houses. And so they then became the property manager for the portfolio. But you've got to have enough properties that you can afford the wages of someone. So now we're talking, 10 plus properties to be able to afford that wage. So you've really got to sort of think through whether that's worth it for you or not. And that's why people will use letting agents. And then I think maybe the other thing to do, which sort of ties us back up to the first, which is about thinking about the living experience. So I've mentioned quite a few of the bits. So number one, if you're working with professionals, so professional people that have to go into an office, that have got to work with other people, they want to be able to shower when they want to shower. get on with their lives, go to work, do what they have to do, come home, do what they have to do. So think about the way that you could lay it out and maybe create the 4-bed, 4-bath type of property that we used to do. And that will take, so you've got to find an area where there is demand for this type of living. And then within that area, you've got to find a house that has the architectural layout that lends itself to this sort of an exchange. And we had a very specific floor plan that we would look to. And once we worked out how to make that floor plan work for us, it was a cookie cutter model, and we just repeated that. So it can be about that for your strangers. It could be, if it's students, that they are less, and just to wind back one piece, so that could be how you use it for your professionals, and they will pay extra to have that private bathroom. So a bathroom could be, or an ensuite room could be as much as another couple £100 a month, compared with a shared bathroom, a bedroom with a shared bathroom. Students might not want to pay a couple £100 extra a month just to have a private bathroom. There might be one in the house that does, but the bulk of the house, if there's 3 or 4 of them and there's 1 or 2 bathrooms, I mean, I know plenty of properties, and there are properties around here where I live where the landlords have kept it as a 4-bedroom property by making 3 bedrooms upstairs, taking one of the reception rooms, and not added in another bathroom at all. So there are 4 people sharing the same bathroom, but they're students. And I'm not saying students are dirty, but students tend to put up with a bit more. They're going through a period of their life where it's more about finding out who they are than really sort of caring too much in that sense about where they live. However, when we do the student properties, what we do is we focus on the communal areas, because sometimes these students have come together as a group. Sometimes they don't know one another, but it's the social side of being at university that is almost as important to these young people as it is about the education. And so we put quite a bit of money into making a very nice outdoor space, sometimes with outdoor heaters, with outdoor furniture, so that they've got somewhere that they can go and sit. The side effect of that is you've got to think about the noise control for next door neighbours. So also having some form of indoor space. And again, seen some properties where the outdoor space is contained within some form of a conservatory. So they've got the space to go and be communal, but the noise isn't necessarily affecting all of the people that live around them. So to summarize, if you don't get this right, houses of multiple occupancy and HMO strategy can completely waste your time, use your time. You won't be the one in control. You need systems. You need to think about the team. Is the team a letting agent? Is the team a local person? Is the team you? What is the need of this particular group of people? Are they professional business people that will pay extra because they can afford to pay extra to have that private bathroom? Or are they people that are more interested in saving money, and so they will put up with a shared bathroom, but they maybe prefer a communal spirit, or they want more space in the kitchen? You've got to know. In fact, always with your property strategy, you've got to know your clients. You've got to know the needs of your tenant. So I hope I've convinced you that an HMO is actually a more advanced strategy, a strategy that can give you extra cash flow, but requires a system in place. And I provide HMOs ready for my clients who have got some more experience, that have had some buy-to-lets, they'll have learned how to manage and respond to a simple 1 contract per house. They'll have seen the impact it makes on their day and their week and their month, and they'll know that they're ready. And when they're ready and the finances are ready and the property prices makes sense to use their money in that way, then an HMO can be the next step up to a way to sort of suddenly expand on their cash flow. And that's fine, but they'll understand how important the system is. They'll have a level of knowledge that they move into, and I will be finding them HMOs that have got a system in place, because it's a complete process, the same as it is with the buy-to-lets that I help my clients buy, there is a system in place for managing them. And then, of course, I'm running the business mentoring across the top as a support for them to make sure that this business works. Because if it doesn't make you happy, if it doesn't make your money work, if it doesn't provide you with a profit, it's just going to eat your soul away, take up your time, make you miserable, and then you're going to sell it. And in the end of it, it's going to have felt like a loss or a failure. And nobody, this is a bold statement, nobody needs to feel like a loss, that they lost out by investing in property, or that they failed at investing in property because they put some money in and they sold out. What they didn't do is get the strategy right, get the systems right, get the team right, get the tenant right, supply the right product for the tenant. And that product could be how the room and ensuite is constructed. It could be that the product is about the living experience. So I hope I've given you plenty to think about HMOs, put a bit more whoosh into your ideas about investing in property. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week. And we'll probably do a bit more on HMOs next week.